Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into one of the strangest and most enchanting tales from 1001 Nights. You find yourself in a palace where the torchlight flickers against walls of polished stone, and the air smells faintly of incense and candle wax, shadows stretch long across the tiles, and there's a quiet hum of danger behind the beauty, because if you happen to be here, you probably won't survive this little bedtime visit. The king is furious, the vizier is worried, and into all this steps a daughter who decides the only weapon she has is her own voice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, or let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the little map of the world you all create. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the king's chamber, where the ruler Scheherazade sits draped in silks that look soft enough to make you forget he's got a reputation for blood and paranoia. His brother's betrayal has twisted him inside out, and now he's convinced that every woman is waiting to betray him too. To deal with this suspicion, he's created a truly unhelpful system: marry a woman at sunset and execute her at dawn. It's not exactly a recipe for stable family life. The palace corridors carry the gossip in whispers. Servants trade glances as they polish silver. Eunuchs lower their voices when the sound of sandals echoes nearby. Everyone knows the pattern. By morning, there will be grief in some household of the city, and the scribe will quietly add another name to the endless list of those lost to royal justice. It's like living in a city where the curfew is always fear itself. Into this atmosphere steps Scheherazade, the vizier's eldest daughter. You catch sight of her in the harem garden earlier in the day, eyes narrowed in concentration. She's not just pretty, though that's always mentioned first. She's sharp as a jeweled dagger. Scheherazade has been reading since she was a child, hoarding scrolls and listening to the traveller's stories when she should have been weaving embroidery. Tonight, her intelligence is about to be the only thing keeping her alive. When she announces to her father that she wants to marry the king, the vizier nearly drops his ink brush. Imagine the medieval equivalent of someone telling you they've signed up for a reality show where the prize is probably death. The poor man tries every argument. She's too young, too precious, too important, but she counters him with a strange calm. If no one interrupts the cycle, she says, every daughter in the city will eventually die. She doesn't plan to break it with swords or armies. She plans to break it with stories. This is where you lean in, because here's the odd historical fact: professional storytelling in medieval Islamic courts wasn't just entertainment, it was considered a serious art form, almost a science of memory, rhetoric, and moral persuasion. Historians still argue whether Scheherazade was inspired by real-life court reciters, or if her figure was entirely symbolic. Either way, she knows the weight of words in a place where one wrong phrase could mean execution. That evening, she dresses not in mourning colours but in shimmering robes, as though she's heading to a feast rather than the gallows. The palace glitters, lanterns swinging gently in the corridors, and you almost catch yourself thinking, well, maybe the king won't notice her plan. But then again, kings who order nightly executions aren't exactly known for their chill attitude. The guards escort her through echoing hallways. Every footstep clicks like a countdown. Somewhere in the distance, a lute plays a melancholy tune. You pass a mural of Alexander the Great, painted centuries earlier, his gaze sharp and victorious. The message isn't subtle. Empires rise and fall, but power, raw, merciless power, still decides who breathes tomorrow. And here comes your quirky tidbit. In some Persian courts, brides and grooms would share a drink of saffron-infused milk on their wedding night. It was supposed to symbolize purity and prosperity. You imagine Scheherazade taking that sip, knowing full well her dawn might never come. It's not exactly the comforting bedtime cocoa you were hoping for. Still, she walks with her head high. The ceremony is brief. The king mutters the words and barely looking at her. You can practically feel the weight of centuries pressing down, the endless cycle of suspicion and fear. But Scheherazade doesn't flinch. Instead, As the chamber grows still, she turns to her new husband with a spark in her eyes and says she would like to tell him a story. It starts innocently enough. An old fisherman, a genie, a strange bargain, but she times it perfectly. Just as the king begins leaning forward, curiosity stirring, she pauses at the cliffhanger. The dawn light begins to seep into the room, execution hour, and yet the king of all people raises a hand and says, "Spare her until tomorrow night. I want to hear how it ends." You can almost hear the servants gasp outside the door. The cycle has paused for the first time in months. Scheherazade lies back on the cushions, her pulse racing, knowing she's bought herself one more day. Is the most dangerous form of binge-watching ever invented. If the king gets bored, you're dead. But if you can keep him hooked night after night, the kingdom might just change forever. The palace sighs into silence somewhere. A candle burns low, and you, sitting there in the corner of this story, know that the gamble has only just begun. You wake the next evening to the rustle of silk against stone, the palace already shifting into twilight mode. The torches flare with that reddish glow that makes even polished marble look dangerous. Everyone's on edge. The king has kept Scheherazade alive for one night, but no one believes it will last. The Vizier, her father, is pacing like a man who knows the end of the story before it's even told. He's a tall figure, cloaked in authority, but tonight he looks shrunken under the weight of his office. This is a man who has spent years managing whispers, balancing the king's moods like a tightrope walker balancing on a frayed rope. He has drawn up treaties, punished rebel, and whispered carefully rehearsed truths into the royal ear. But now, for the first time since Bourg, his duty collides with his heart. His own daughter is the one lying in that dangerous chamber, telling tales to a monarch who sees women as disposable. As he paces, you almost want to remind him of a historical fact. Viziers in the medieval Islamic courts were often described as the shadow of the king. They were the ones expected to think what the king would not, to restrain what the king could not, and to risk blame for mistakes that weren't their own. Historians still argue whether the Vizier in this tale reflects a real minister in Baghdad or Cairo, or whether he's simply a storybook version of every exhausted bureaucrat who's ever sighed into his paperwork. He stops at a window, looking out over the city. The rooftops are glowing with oil lamps. Somewhere, music drifts faintly from a wedding. Because, unbelievably, life goes on in the city even while fear reigns in the palace. Children are laughing in courtyards, bread is baking in ovens, and the stars above don't seem to care who rules or who falls. The Vizier sighs, muttering to himself. You catch fragments, words about duty, thoughts about shame, about what kind of father offers his child to death. It's like watching a man lose a chess game he didn't even want to play. He thinks about his younger daughter too, who clings to his robes and asks why her sister has gone to the palace. What answer can he give? The king is unwell, and stories are our only medicine. Not exactly bedtime material for a child. And yet, there's another layer here. You remember a quirky tidbit? In some versions of the 1001 Nights, the Vizier actually tries to test Scheherazade before letting her marry the king, telling her cautionary tales of women who overstepped and paid for it. Imagine the awkward family dinner conversation. Pass the dates. Dear daughter, and by the way, let me tell you a fable about a girl who disobeyed her father and was eaten by a djinn. Parenting standards clearly different back then. But Scheherazade had been resolute. She knew what she was walking into, and that makes the Vizier's heart ache even more. To him, she's still the girl who used to tug on his sleeve asking for one more story before sleep. Now she's the one carrying the fate of countless women on her shoulders. As dawn creeps near, the Vizier imagines the worst. He pictures the guards bringing him the news, the servants washing his daughter's body. The weight of inevitability presses down so hard he can almost hear the stone tiles groaning beneath him. And then, something impossible happens. A eunuch arrives, bowing low, and announces that the king has ordered Scheherazade spared for another night. The vizier blinks. Stunned, he asks the messenger to repeat it. Like a man who doesn't trust his own ears, twice spared, the cycle is broken for now. He collapses onto a low couch, head in his hands. Relief battles with dread. Every extra day she lives, the bond deepens and the risk sharpens. If she fails in her storytelling, the punishment could be worse. The vizier mutters again about fate, about whether he's complicit in saving lives or just prolonging his daughter's torment. This is where historians disagree. Some argue that the vizier in these tales is little more than a foil, a symbol of patriarchal authority trying and failing to stop a woman from exercising agency. Others see him as a more tragic figure, a man trapped by law, bound by duty, and tortured by a choice that has no right answer. Outside his chamber, the palace continues to hum, the cooks are chopping herbs, the scribes are sharpening reed pens, and guards march with that heavy rhythm that makes even a sleepless night sound disciplined. But the vizier feels none of it. He's inside his own storm. He leans back, staring at the ceiling, and whispers a prayer you can't quite catch. Perhaps it's to Allah, perhaps it's to fate, perhaps it's to the old ghosts of viziers past who have walked this line between service and sacrifice. All he knows is that his daughter is still alive tonight, and maybe, just maybe, she has a plan grander than even he dares imagine. The dawn light spills across his desk, scattering on scrolls and maps. Somewhere in the palace, Scheherazade's voice is drifting into silence as she saves herself once again with the sharp edge of a story, and the vizier, for all his doubts, finds himself holding his breath, waiting to see if tomorrow will bring life or loss. The palace may be steeped in paranoia, but you hear murmurs that slip through the cracks of stone walls and drift into the kitchens, the courtyards, the stables. These are whispers of something beyond the king's cruelty and the vizier's torment. The servants, half asleep at their looms and fires, tell stories of a hidden garden somewhere outside the palace, a place untouched by the endless cycle of dawn executions. The rumours paint it differently depending on who speaks. To some, it's a ruin from an ancient dynasty, left to crumble but still heavy with magic. To others, it's paradise itself, waiting for the pure of heart or the foolish to stumble inside. And if you're wondering whether such secret gardens ever existed, here's your historical fact for the night. Many medieval cities in the Islamic world did have bustan, enclosed orchards or gardens designed as private refuges. Some belonged to sultans, some to scholars, and some were deliberately kept hidden from outsiders. Historians still argue whether the secret garden in this story reflects a real lost orchard, or whether it's just a metaphor for forbidden knowledge. Still, the gossip persists. A gardener's apprentice swears he saw moonlight reflecting off fountains hidden behind a broken archway. A palace maid insists her grandmother once plucked figs there, sweeter than honey. A guard whispers he heard strange birds singing in languages no man could understand. You begin to feel that tingle on your neck, the one that says there's more to this tale than superstition. The vizier's daughter, Scheherazade, listens closely. Between her nightly cliffhanger sessions with the king, she catches fragments of these stories. A maid lets slip that the path is marked by cypress trees. An old cook mutters about a gate that only opens under the crescent moon. Scheherazade gathers these details the way a traveller hoards water in the desert, carefully, secretly, and with a kind of hunger that goes beyond curiosities. There's irony here. In the palace, every word she speaks is a weapon to keep herself alive. Outside, she dreams of a place where words aren't necessary, where the scent of jasmine might be enough to silence her fear. And yet, she knows better than to trust rumours blindly. After all, this is a world where crocodile dung sunscreen was once considered a good idea. People believe strange things. One night, while walking the harem's quieter halls, she overhears two scribes debating. One insists the garden was built by the Abbasids, a dynasty famed for its opulence. The other scoffs, saying it was older still, maybe left over from the time of Solomon, when men claimed to command jinn. The debate ends in laughter, but Scheherazade feels the spark catch, a place that could be both history and myth. That's exactly the kind of riddle that keeps her alive at night. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval scholars believed certain plants could speak, not metaphorically, literally open their blossoms and whisper truths to those who listened. Imagine wandering into a garden where the roses gossip louder than the servants. It makes the rumours about Scheherazade's secret place sound just a little less impossible. Of course, there's danger too. Servants mutter that the garden tests those who enter. Some return with strange dreams, others never return at all. One guard swears he saw a man step through the archway and turn instantly to stone. Another insists the garden is a prison for wandering spirits, trapped until someone with wit or foolishness sets them free. You're starting to realise this isn't just a casual stroll with a picnic basket situation. Scheherazade, though, feels the pull. Perhaps it's the same instinct that drives her to tell stories at risk of her life, the urge to find a thread of wonder in the middle of terror. She begins watching the moon more carefully. The crescent waxes and wanes, and with each cycle, her thoughts grow heavier with the idea that she must find this place herself. Meanwhile, the Vizier notices her distracted air. He thinks it's exhaustion from telling tales every night, and maybe it partly is. But when she stares too long at the latticework window, her mind isn't on the king's chamber. It's wandering through rumours of ivy-choked gates, pools that glow in moonlight, and secrets waiting in silence. The palace itself seems to conspire in these whispers. A scrap of old parchment turns up in the library with faded sketches of trees. A wandering scholar recalls a garden of the hidden moon in a forgotten chronicle. Even the way the wind howls through the halls seems to be nudging her, saying, there is more beyond these walls. By the time another week passes and the king once again spares her life, Scheherazade feels more certain than ever. If survival depends on stories, then perhaps the greatest story lies just outside, waiting for her to discover it. And you, sitting in the dark with her, can almost smell the jasmine already, faint and sweet, curling through the cracks of palace stone. The night you finally step out of the palace is the kind of night that makes the stars feel closer than the lamps in the courtyard. The torches behind you flicker against high stone walls, but you keep walking forward, sandals pressing into the dust of the outer streets. Scheherazade's robe brushes the ground as she moves, quiet as a shadow. She's followed the fragments of rumour for days, but tonight the moon is thin, a sliver of silver like a blade, and that's when the servant said the hidden gate would show itself. The city beyond the palace has its own rhythm. You hear merchants still haggling in the night markets, though their voices are softer now, tinged with weariness. A donkey brays somewhere in the dark, as if offering sarcastic commentary on your dangerous errand. The air smells of spice, cardamom, saffron, and faint traces of roasting lamb. It's ordinary life, wrapped around the extraordinary gamble you're making. You might think sneaking out of a medieval palace is impossible, but history says otherwise. Here's your fact. In Abbasid Baghdad, there were entire networks of secret passageways that allowed royals and courtiers to slip between quarters without being seen. Some historians still argue whether these passages were practical architecture or just poetic exaggerations in chronicles, but either way, Scheherazade's world is one where hidden doors are not unthinkable. She walks past a mosque, its minaret pointing to the heavens, the call to prayer long finished. Stray cats dart between alleyways, their eyes gleaming like polished gems. Every sound seems louder now, the scrape of her sandals, the rustle of fabric, even her breath. You can almost hear her heartbeat matching yours, steady, but quickening as she nears the edge of the city. And then, the landmarks begin to match the whispers. 2 tall cypress trees stand side by side like sentinels, their branches etched against the starlight. Beneath them, a crumbling arch half swallowed by ivy. It looks ordinary enough, just another ruin among many, but you feel the tug of something older, stranger. Scheherazade hesitates. She presses her hand against the stone. It's cool, worn smooth but faintly vibrating, as if humming with memory. For a second you think you hear voices, soft, layered, like conversation spoken centuries ago. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe you've stumbled onto the world's earliest version of a magical voice recorder. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Medieval engineers in the Islamic Golden Age actually created singing fountains that gurgled music using water pressure and tuned pipes. People at the time swore they heard voices in the flow. It makes you wonder, how much of legend is just advanced plumbing misunderstood? Still, this arch feels less like plumbing and more like a threshold. She slips through. On the other side, the night air changes. It smells heavier, sweeter, as though jasmine and myrrh have been waiting for centuries to exhale. The ground softens beneath her feet, and ahead, in the faint glow of moonlight, a gate shimmers into view. It's wrought iron, curling like vines, but no smith you know could have forged it, because the patterns twist and change even as you look at them. She presses the gate, expecting resistance. Instead, it sighs open soundlessly, as though recognizing her. You can't help but laugh nervously, because in every horror film ever made, this is the moment someone says, "Let's split up." But Scheherazade isn't afraid. Her whole life has been a gamble, and this is just another story to step into. Behind her, the city is muffled now, distant as if she's already crossed into another realm. The crickets grow louder, the stars seem to rearrange themselves above, and a faint glow pulses just beyond the trees. She draws in a breath. The secret garden, if the whispers are true, is waiting. And here's the scholarly debate you can't shake. Some argue this garden was originally a symbol of paradise, a stand-in for the afterlife, meant to remind listeners of divine mercy. Others claim it was a metaphor for knowledge, hidden, dangerous, but transformative. Either way, when you stand with Scheherazade before the moonlit gate, you feel both possibilities pressing on your shoulders. She steps inside. The air thickens with perfume. The branches above arch into a canopy, the leaves glimmering faintly as though painted with starlight. You're no longer in the palace's world of torches and fear. You're in a place where time itself seems to pause, holding its breath. And in that seance, with the faintest hum of water somewhere deeper within, you realize you've crossed into a story within the story, and there may be no going back. The first breath you take inside the garden is like inhaling a dream. The air is so thick with scent you almost feel it pressing against your lungs, jasmine curling sweetly, roses sharp as wine, citrus blossoms tangling in between. It's as if every flower from every season decided to bloom at once, just to prove a point. Scheherazade pauses, steadying herself, because even she has never imagined a perfume this overwhelming. The path beneath her feet glimmers faintly, lined with smooth white stones that glow as if reflecting a moon you can't quite see. She follows it forward, eyes wide, and you feel the pull with her. Ahead, water sings. A fountain rises in the centre of the first courtyard, jets of silver arching high before splintering into droplets that sparkle like jewels. It looks impossible. But here's a historical fact. Medieval engineers, especially in Andalusia and Baghdad, actually mastered hydraulic tricks that made fountains leap and dance in ways modern visitors would still find magical. Historians still argue whether the truly impossible fountains, those that supposedly shifted colours or produced glowing mist, were based on real technology or pure imagination. Scheherazade dips her hand into the fountain's pool. The water is cool, but when she lifts her fingers, droplets cling and glow faintly, refusing to fall. You watch them shimmer like tiny captive stars until they finally vanish into the air. The garden clearly plays by different rules. And then the trees. Imagine an orchard where pomegranates hang like lanterns, figs like polished gems, and pears heavy enough to bend branches low. She touches a branch and hears a faint hum, like strings of a lute plucked somewhere far away. You half expect the tree to start critiquing her storytelling style. It doesn't, but the sound lingers, vibrating in her bones. Here's your quirky tidbit. Medieval travellers' tales often swore that trees in faraway lands could sing or even talk. Marco Polo claimed to have seen trees dripping with wool. He probably meant cotton, but hey, wool trees make a better bedtime story. In this garden, the legends feel less like exaggerations and more like casual Tuesday reality. Scheherazade walks deeper, brushing her hand against herbs that release their fragrance at her touch. Mint, basil, saffron. Fireflies drift lazily, though you realise they're not fireflies at all. Each one glows a different colour, blue, green, gold, and they trace words in the air before fading. For a second, you think you see your own name flicker there, then vanish like a secret you weren't meant to know. The garden isn't strident. Beneath the fountain's song and the humming trees, there's a low undercurrent, like a heartbeat. It's steady, patient, as if the whole place is alive and aware of your presence. You glance at Scheherazade, and she seems to sense it too. She isn't afraid, but her eyes are sharper now, wary. This isn't just a place of beauty, it's also a place of tests. She pauses beside a marble bench, vines curling over it in spirals. Ancient script is etched faintly into the stone. You lean closer, but the letters seem to rearrange themselves whenever you blink. Maybe it's Arabic. Maybe it's Persian. Maybe it's something older still. Historians would have a field day here. And yes, they still argue whether the 1001 Nights pulled fragments of stories from lost civilizations, threading them together like pearls. In this garden feels as though all those fragments have gathered in one place, waiting. A soft breeze rises, carrying with it the sound of laughter, not cruel laughter, not mocking, but light, like children playing at a distance. Scheherazade tilts her head, trying to follow it. The sound fades when she moves forward, then grows when she stops. It's as if the garden is teasing her, saying, "You may look, but only when we allow it." She presses onward. The deeper she goes, the less the city exists. The air is cooler here, almost like dawn, though the moon is still high. She passes a tree with golden leaves that fall silently, vanishing before they touch the ground. She kneels to catch one, and her fingers close on nothing but air. And here's the joke you can't help. If this were a tourist attraction, the brochure would definitely leave out the part about vanishing leaves. Come for the fruit, stay for the existential crisis. By the time she reaches the inner circle of the garden, her pulse is steady, but her mind is racing. Every step here feels like stepping through layers of stories, the kind she's used to telling. But now she's inside one. No cliffhanger possible, no pause button to save her. The fountain song deepens, the trees seem to lean closer, and Scheherazade knows she hasn't just found beauty, she's found something watching her. The deeper you wander into the garden, the more you feel it watching you, not with menace exactly, but with the weight of centuries. The path narrows, winding between clusters of cypress and fig trees until it opens into a wide courtyard paved with cracked marble. Moonlight pours across the stones, revealing what lies in the centre: ruins. At first, you think they're just fragments of old architecture, pillars snapped in half, a toppled arch, a scattering of worn tiles. But when Scheherazade steps closer, the air seems to shift. The pillars are etched with inscriptions, faint grooves that still catch the silver glow. She runs her fingers across them, tracing words carved by hands long gone. Here's your historical fact. In many parts of the medieval Islamic world, it was common to recycle the ruins of older empires. Abbasids built over Umayyads, Mamluks over Abbasids, and sometimes the stones carried inscriptions from centuries earlier. Historians still argue whether the ruins described in the 1001 Nights were imagined, or whether they preserved memories of real ancient monuments swallowed by sand and time. Scheherazade kneels beside a cracked slab, brushing away vines. The inscription shows a line of kings stretching back into myth, names she half recognizes from legends, the kind usually told by caravan traders to wide-eyed children. But the last few names blur, vanishing into symbols no one today would easily read. It's as though the stone itself grew tired of recording history and decided to drift into poetry. You glance around, and the ruins don't feel abandoned. They feel suspended, as if someone left mid-sentence and promised to return. A broken arch frames the night sky, and for a moment, you see constellations perfectly aligned within it, Orion balanced between stone shoulders, the Pleiades clustered where an old keystone should be. It's too neat to be coincidence. And here's your quirky tidbit. Medieval astronomers often built observatories that doubled as symbolic monuments, some even aligned with star risings or solstices. You start to wonder if this garden was less about flowers and more about cosmic calendars, a celestial science lab disguised as paradise. Scheherazade tilts her head, noticing the same thing. She whispers the name of a star under her breath, and the marble beneath her feet hums faintly, just once, then goes still. It's enough to make the hairs on your arms rise. The ruins tell stories beyond words. One wall, half buried, shows carvings of strange animals, lions with wings, serpents with human faces, birds carrying scrolls. The figures are half eroded, but they pulse with that eerie familiarity you feel when myth and memory blur. Were these just symbolic guardians, or records of creatures people once believed in? Historians still argue whether such hybrid beasts in Islamic art were purely decorative, or whether they reflected real local beliefs smuggled into architecture. Scheherazade lingers on one carving in particular, a woman seated beneath a tree, holding a tablet. The carving is chipped, but her eyes seem alive, following Scheherazade's every move. She presses her hand against the stone, and for a heartbeat she swears the tablet warms under her palm. Then the wind picks up, leaves scatter across the marble. Whispering as they move, some of them snag against the inscriptions, as though trying to draw attention to certain words. You lean closer, and just for a moment, you think you see the letters rearrange themselves into a phrase, know the past to survive the present. Then the wind dies, and the words are gone. It's the kind of moment that would make you doubt your sanity, except in a garden where water glows and trees hum. It almost feels like par for the course. You can't help but add a small joke to ease the tension. Great, even the landscaping here is giving out unsolicited life advice. Next thing you know, the shrubs will start telling me to hydrate and call my mum. Scheherazade, though, is deadly serious. She senses the ruins aren't warnings meant to scare her away. They're invitations, clues left behind by those who once walked here, meant for whoever is bold or foolish enough to follow. The fountain behind her gurgles louder, echoing against the cracked marble. The trees rustle though there is no breeze. It feels as if the entire garden is leaning in, waiting to see whether she'll listen to the voices carved into stone. Scheherazade straightens, her hand brushing dust from her robe, and whispers to herself that she will return tomorrow. But you know her mind is already racing. Every symbol, every half-erased inscription, every carving of beasts and kings, it's all part of a puzzle. And puzzles, if you've been paying attention, are the kind of thing that keeps her alive. The night deepens, and the garden grows quieter. Though quiet here is never simple silence. It's alive with subtleties. The faint drip of water echoing from hidden channels. The hush of leaves shifting against each other. The slow exhale of stone cooling after centuries under the sun. You feel as though the garden itself is practicing a kind of breathwork, steady and ancient, teaching you how to listen differently. Scheherazade lingers near the ruins, reluctant to leave. Her eyes shine with the reflection of moonlight on broken marble, but more than that, with the spark of recognition. This place is a story, and she is already weaving it. She kneels again by the inscriptions, running her hand along the grooves. Here's a historical note for you. In many parts of the Islamic Golden Age, scholars carried wax tablets or parchment scraps into gardens like these. Scribbling notes while surrounded by water and greenery, they believed nature sharpened memory, and fountains kept the mind calm. It wasn't just a garden, it was a study hall of the cosmos, and perhaps that's exactly what this ruin once was. Scheherazade tilts her head, murmuring the beginning of a tale she might spin for the king, a tale of ruins that align with the stars, of inscriptions that change meaning depending on moonlight, of beasts carved in stone that guard forgotten truths. She smiles faintly, though there is exhaustion behind it. Storytelling, after all, is both shield and sword. You notice her pause by a low wall overgrown with ivy. She pulls the vines aside, revealing more carvings, less majestic than the winged lions, but stranger in their intimacy. They show ordinary people, a man holding a fish, a woman carrying bread, children chasing each other in circles. Their faces are worn smooth, yet they radiate a kind of joy. This small detail catches her. Why would such humble scenes be carved into sacred stone? Historians often overlooked these fragments, dismissing them as decorative fillers, but some modern scholars argue they were deliberate, reminders that daily life itself was sacred, that paradise wasn't just towering palaces or perfect symmetry, but also laughter, bread, and games in the dust. Scheherazade whispers to herself, "Stories are built from both kings and bakers. Forget either, and you forget the world." You can't resist teasing her softly. I guess even ancient civilizations had family photo albums, just with a bit more marble and less awkward posing. She laughs, the sound light but fleeting, like a pebble dropped into still water. It feels good, though laughter keeps the ruins from turning too solemn, too heavy. Then, as if on cue, something shifts. The fountain in the courtyard lets out a sudden gurgle, almost like a cough, spraying a mist that catches the moonlight. The droplets scatter, forming a brief rainbow even in the dark. You rub your eyes, but the shimmer doesn't vanish. It seems to hover, coalescing into patterns, letters, perhaps, or constellations. Scheherazade sees it too. She steps closer, hand raised, as though to catch the light. For a heartbeat, the spray sketches the outline of a door where no wall stands, a door made of water and air, framed by moonlight, flickering at the edge of vision. You freeze. Is this imagination, optical trickery, or something more? Here's your fact. Medieval engineers were masters of hydraulics. They built fountains that whistled, sang, even spat bursts of water on unsuspecting passers-by as a kind of prank. The 12th century engineer Al-Jazari described dozens of such devices: hydraulic doors, clocks powered by dripping water, automata that bowed and played music. In a way, what you see could be a remnant of that science, exaggerated by time and myth. Or it could be something else entirely. Scheherazade steps back just as the rainbow door fades, leaving only ordinary spray and marble, but her expression has changed. She's not startled. She looks thoughtful, as if she expected this, or at least hoped for it. The garden is full of stories, yes, but perhaps also full of gates. She gathers her robe and finally turns toward the palace. You feel her reluctance, though. Every step away from the ruins is a promise to return, and you know she will. As you follow her back through the path, the garden seems to sigh, as though tucking itself back into secrecy. The vines fall naturally into place over the carvings. The fountain's mist subsides into ordinary spray. The inscriptions blur again in shadow. But in your ears, faint as breath, you carry a final whisper from the ruins, not in words, but in rhythm, a beat like footsteps, a pulse like a heart, the garden, alive, waiting. Scheherazade doesn't speak as she approaches the palace gates, but you sense the question burning inside her. What lies beyond a door made of water and moonlight, and what story will I need to tell to unlock it? You wander deeper into the secret garden, And this time the air itself seems to ripple with mystery. The moonlight filters down through curling vines, silvering every leaf so it looks like a blade of metal. It feels less like a garden now and more like a living map. Its pathways pulling you forward as if they've been waiting centuries just for your footsteps. And then, without warning, you spot something out of place. An ancient scroll case propped up inside the hollow of a tree trunk. You'd expect maybe some moss, a few ants, or at most a family of owls in there, but no. Instead, it's parchment tied with silk ribbon, aged but unbroken. You lift it out carefully, brushing away dust that's older than your entire family tree, and you notice that the ribbon isn't just decorative, it's knotted in a deliberate pattern. Historians still argue whether knots like these were meant as practical seals or as coded messages, tiny braids standing in for letters only the right eyes could read. You tug at it gently, and the scroll unfurls with a sigh, as if it has been holding its breath for 1,000 years. The words inside are in Arabic script, but you don't need a doctorate to realize they're not mere gardening instructions. They speak in riddles about a hidden chamber under the fountain, a place where the roots of wisdom drink the water of stars. That's a sentence you'd expect in a fantasy novel, not from a royal archive, but remember, real medieval texts often mix science, religion, and wild imagination in ways we can barely categorize now. For example, one 13th century manuscript claimed you could heal broken bones by pressing emeralds against them. Was it effective? Let's just say medieval orthopedics were more jewellery store chic than scientifically rigorous. You tuck the scroll under your arm, feeling both thrilled and slightly terrified. A secret chamber means buried knowledge, or traps. You've seen enough adventure movies to know you can't just waltz into underground chambers without at least a few booby traps or cursed inscriptions. Still, curiosity drives you forward, and maybe a touch of sleep-deprived bravado. You mutter to yourself. Yeah, sure, secret underground rooms in abandoned gardens. Nothing creepy about that. The next path curls around to the central fountain. Its waters look darker now, as though reflecting not the moon, but something deeper, something that tugs faintly at your stomach. You lean closer and notice carved letters around the basin rim. Some are chipped away, others worn smooth, but enough remain that you can piece together fragments, references to the children of the stars and the key of listening. Scholars still debate whether medieval poets meant literal constellations when they wrote about star children, or whether it was just romantic shorthand for being really, really good at staying up all night. You kneel, scroll in hand, and test the stones around the fountain. One shifts with surprising ease, as though waiting to be discovered. You push harder, and the stone grinds back, opening a narrow passage just big enough for you to squeeze through. Dust falls from the edges like breadcrumbs, and your heart beats faster. You've unlocked the first puzzle. Sliding into the darkness, you discover stairs spiraling downward. The air grows cooler, damp with the scent of old earth. Your footsteps echo, mixing with faint trickles of water. In the silence, every sound feels exaggerated. The scrape of your shoe, the thud of your pulse, even the tiny creak when you flex your hand against the scroll case somewhere behind you. The fountain's gurgle continues, a reminder that the world above is still turning, still normal. Down here, it feels like time has no business existing. At the bottom, you arrive at a chamber that glimmers faintly, not from torches or lanterns, but from fragments of crystal embedded in the ceiling, catching stray beams of moonlight through unseen Hastero cracks. It's as though the stars themselves have crept underground just to keep you company. In the centre stands a pedestal, and upon it a metal box etched with curling script. You hesitate. Boxes in secret chambers never contain normal stuff. They don't hold spare socks or grandma's recipes. They hold things like cursed gems, talking skulls, or at best, an intimidating contract that's legally binding for the next 1,000 years. And yet, you step closer, The scroll in your arm feels warmer, as though it wants to introduce itself to the box. And that's when you realise this is no ordinary scroll. It's a key, not the metal teeth kind, but the metaphorical kind, where words unlock meanings and meanings unlock doors. You press the scroll against the lid and the box shudders, the chamber trembles, dust sifting from the ceiling. The lid slides open with a hiss, like some ancient mechanism finally exhaling. Inside lies not treasure, but another parchment, this one glowing faintly, as though inked with starlight instead of dye. You lift it carefully, and the writing dances as though alive. It tells of a forgotten library hidden beneath the palace itself, a place filled with stories too dangerous or too precious to ever leave their vaults. And you, it seems, have just been recruited by history to find it. Lucky you! Or unlucky, depending on how much you enjoy being haunted by scrolls that literally glow in the dark. The moonlight guides you deeper into the garden's veins, as if every stone path is a secret artery carrying whispers to your ears alone. The Vizier's daughter walks beside you, her lamp flickering like a conspirator trying to reveal more than it should. You hear water running not just from fountains but from channels carved beneath the soil, like underground veins designed to keep the garden alive. The sound is almost hypnotic, like the steady tick of a clock, reminding you that every paradise has its own rhythm, whether or not you choose to notice. And now you begin to notice more, vines that grow not randomly, but with a suspicious intentionality, as if someone long ago planned exactly where each tendril would fall. One historian would tell you gardens in the medieval Islamic world weren't just for beauty, they were cosmic blueprints. 4 channels of water often symbolize the rivers of paradise. You've stumbled into one such design here. Paths divide the garden into quarters, with water flowing at right angles, an echo of that heavenly geometry. But then there's the strange thing no historian quite agrees on, the idea that some of these gardens doubled as secret libraries. Scholars still argue whether certain lush retreats were in fact coded archives, with plant placement representing astronomical charts. You glance at the star-like layout of blossoms before you, and can't help but wonder, are you standing inside a living manuscript? The Vizier's daughter smirks as if she knows the answer but refuses to tell. She pauses at a carved niche in the wall where the pattern of vines has framed an image, almost like a tapestry woven in green. You lean closer and swear you see the outline of a lion, though maybe your sleepy eyes are tricking you, or maybe not. After all, medieval gardens often carried hidden messages, symbols of kingship, courage, or warnings to intruders. The lion is faint, yet there, a leafy spectre reminding you that this paradise is guarded by something more than walls. You walk on, brushing against lavender stalks that release sleepy perfume into the air. It's almost unfair how effective this scent is at slowing your pulse. You remember that medieval physicians prescribed lavender for both headaches and heartbreaks. Imagine being dumped in the year 1200 and your best friend says, "Here, sniff this shrub, you'll feel better." And it actually sort of worked. Your own head clears as you inhale, and for a moment you lose track of what's real. Are you in a tale, or are you merely dreaming? The daughter doesn't break the silence. Instead, she points upward where branches arch into a canopy. The branches don't just interlace, they weave like threads in an embroidered silk. You recall how Persian garden designers often saw their landscapes as extensions of textile art, stitching colours and textures onto the earth itself. And then there's that other odd tidbit. Some 15th century gardeners supposedly trained nightingales by planting certain shrubs they preferred. Like a medieval DJ programming a playlist with flowers, you half expect a bird to drop a track right now. Your steps crunch softly on gravel, rhythmic enough that you almost convince yourself you're tapping into the heartbeat of the place. Yet there's also tension. Every paradise, no matter how serene, hides a shadow. The deeper you go, the stronger you sense that the garden doesn't just grow, it listens, roots dig down like ears pressed to the earth. leaves twitch at your passage. Even the air thickens, as though each breath is shared with unseen watchers. You pass through an arched passage where jasmine tangles above like a chandelier. The scent is overpowering, almost cloying. But in that moment you understand why medieval writers describe jasmine as both intoxicating and dangerous. Too much perfume could muddle the senses, leaving you vulnerable. The daughter glances sideways at you, her eyes glinting with some unspoken warning. You catch yourself thinking that maybe she's not merely leading you through a garden, maybe she's testing you, like a scholar turning the pages of a book to see if you'll notice the margins. The path bends again, and this time you see a pool at its heart. The water reflects the moon and your face, but strangely not hers. You blink, lean closer, and still her reflection does not appear. Historians still debate whether medieval stories about magical water mirrors were allegory or genuine belief. Either way, staring into this surface makes your skin prickle. The Vizier's daughter finally breaks the silence, whispering, "Not all things deserve to be reflected." Her voice lingers like smoke, both chilling and oddly soothing. Then, as you stand there between jasmine and water, with vines spelling out lions and stars above your head, you realize the garden isn't meant to be simply walked through. It's meant to be read, line by line, symbol by symbol. The Vizier's daughter closes her lamp, plunging you into silvery moonlight. She seems to trust that you'll keep moving forward even without the comfort of flame, and you do, because by now, turning back feels impossible. You're halfway through a book, and you're not the type to stop before the twist. The air cools as you step farther into the night-drenched garden, the kind of coolness that isn't just temperature, but a shift in atmosphere. As if the earth itself has drawn in a Siam breath. The pool behind you ripples faintly, though no wind stirs, and you can't shake the thought that the water is whispering to itself in a language older than words. The Vizier's daughter does not look back. She seems at ease, as though she's walked this exact path 1,000 times in her dreams. Perhaps she has, perhaps you have too. Ahead the path straightens, lined on both sides with cypress trees, tall, dark, and impossibly slender, like sentinels guarding a passageway into another realm. You recall reading that in the medieval Islamic world. Cypress trees symbolized eternity, often planted in cemeteries as reminders of what outlasts mortal lives. Here they do not mourn, instead they seem to stand as gatekeepers, ushering you towards some deeper chamber of meaning. Their shadows stretch like spears across the gravel. For a moment, you imagine they could shift at will, pointing you towards truths you may not wish to face. Scholars of garden design sometimes call spaces like this corridors of contemplation. They were meant to quiet the mind, narrow its focus, and prepare it for revelation. But not every revelation is gentle. You catch the faint glimmer of something carved into one tree's bark. Not words, but a spiral, precise and deliberate. You touch it and find it smooth, polished by more fingers than yours. Spirals meant infinity, renewal, a journey with no end. Yet the thought unsettles you. Who carved this? And why does the wood feel warmer than stone under moonlight should allow? The daughter notices your pause. "Some lessons cannot be written," she murmurs. "So they are planted." Then she keeps walking, leaving you to trail after her with the spiral burned into your memory. You think about how medieval thinkers often blurred the line between botany and philosophy. A garden wasn't just plants, it was a textbook, a prayer, a coded map of the soul. And here you are, paging through it with your feet. Soon the cypress avenue opens into another square, this one quieter than the last. At its centre sits a marble basin, empty of water yet full of petals, crimson and white scattered, as if tossed deliberately. The scent is faint, but powerful enough to tug you inward. Roses, always roses. They meant so many things in this era. Love, secrecy, divine beauty, blood, sacrifice. An entire library's worth of symbolism condensed into one bloom. You think of the phrase sub rosa, under the rose, a symbol of secrets. To meet beneath roses was to vow silence. Perhaps this courtyard is itself a chamber of silence, a place where truths are spoken only to the night. Your guide kneels and picks up one petal. Placing it in your hand, it feels softer than skin, yet it carries weight, as if memory itself has been pressed into its veins. She leans closer. Every rose here is a word someone failed to say aloud. Together they make a language no one remembers. The thought lingers like perfume. You hold the petal carefully, as though it might crumble into dust if you grip too tightly, see? Strange facts bubble to mind. Medieval physicians believed rose oil could soothe madness, calm fevers, even exorcise nightmares. Perhaps these petals once carried cures for souls as well as bodies. You're tempted to scatter them in the air to see whether the silence breaks into song. But you don't. Some instincts whisper that disrupting this language would be dangerous. Instead, you let the petal rest against your palm until it feels like part of you. Around the square, walls rise high and blank, except for one arch where a mosaic glimmers faintly in the moonlight. The tiles form a scene of birds in flight, wings outstretched against a backdrop of abstract stars. You squint and notice the arrangement is not random. The stars align with certain constellations, the birds tilted as though imitating their positions in the sky. A medieval astronomer could probably read this wall as a chart, translating tiles into time. You can only wonder whether it maps nights long past or nights still to come. The daughter does not explain. She simply passes under the mosaic archway, her lamp still unlit. You follow, your footfalls echoing louder now as if stone beneath you has hollow space underneath. The tunnel curves, carrying you forward like a vein in the garden's body. You hear faint dripping, distant as a memory of rain. Then the air shifts again. Cooler, damper, the scent of earth heavier. You know before you see it that you're descending into something hidden. When you emerge, you find yourself not in another courtyard, but in a chamber half open to the sky. Roots dangle from above like ropes. They glisten faintly in the moonlight, and some even pulse with a faint glow. You recall strange tales of medieval gardens rumoured to house root caves, places where alchemists grew plants in darkness to study their secret powers. Some said the roots could hum with energy, carrying whispers from the underworld. You laugh it off in your mind, but the laugh sounds brittle, because here, in this chamber, the roots do hum, faintly, just enough to unsettle your breath. The Vizier's daughter places a finger to her lips, asking for silence. You obey, and in that silence you hear it clearly, a rhythm, steady and deep, like the beat of a giant heart buried beneath the soil. You realize then that this garden isn't just designed, it's alive in a way you don't yet understand. You close your eyes, half afraid, half hypnotized, letting the sound wrap around you. The hum carries a lull, a vibration that seeps into your chest and slows your pulse to its measure. And just like that, despite the strangeness, you begin to relax. The garden holds you in its sound, a cradle of roots and rhythm. You could stay here forever, drifting into sleep, never asking what lies deeper still. You wake before dawn, roused by the whisper of leaves brushing against stone, as though the garden itself is urging you onward. The scent of jasmine hangs heavy in the air, sticky and sweet, while the faintest trace of dew chills your fingertips when you touch the carved wall near your pillow. Somehow you've fallen asleep in the garden, and for a moment you wonder if the whole thing has been a fever dream, until a vine curls toward you like a beckoning hand, tugging you to rise. It's the garden's way of reminding you the work is not yet finished. The Vizier's daughter is already awake, her silhouette outlined in the soft pre-dawn glow. Her eyes shine with determination, but also with weariness. She tells you the garden has been growing restless. Its balance depends on someone who can mediate between the outside world and its hidden heart, that someone, unfortunately, appears to be you. You'd hoped for a role more glamorous, maybe like chosen hero with sword or keeper of mystical lamps, but no, you're the part-time plant therapist. And yet, as you trail after her through rows of pomegranate and myrtle, you realise that this calling, odd as it sounds, carries a quiet dignity. You're introduced to a secret hidden deeper within the walls, a smaller inner courtyard encased by marble colonnades. At its centre lies a fountain carved in the shape of a lion, water pouring from its jaws, but unlike any fountain you've seen, this one hums with a low vibration, resonant enough to settle in your bones. The daughter explains that this is the garden's true heart, a relic said to have been crafted by artisans from Andalusia who fled eastward centuries ago. Historians still argue whether such Andalusian stonemasons carried esoteric knowledge of water acoustics with them, or whether later scribes simply romanticized the tale. Either way, standing near it, you feel your pulse slow to match the rhythm of the water. The daughter shows you how to dip your hands into the fountain's basin, then press your palms against the trunk of a nearby olive tree. The effect is immediate. A shimmer spreads across the bark, and faint murmurs enter your mind, not words exactly, but impressions, hunger, thirst, contentment, sorrow. The plants are alive in ways beyond photosynthesis. They broadcast their moods like teenagers updating a group chat. And here's the kicker, you can hear them. You didn't ask for this skill, but congratulations, you're now the customer service rep for the flora of a mythical garden. The daughter teaches you simple gestures to soothe the plants, brushing dust from their leaves, offering whispered reassurances, and occasionally when the garden sulks, singing softly, she hums an old tune, something her grandmother once passed down. It's off-key, but it works. The vines untangle, blossoms ope wider, and the fountain's hum deepens in approval. You try humming too, and though your voice cracks embarrassingly, a nearby fig tree rewards you by dropping a perfectly ripe fruit at your feet. That's basically a 5-star Yelp review in garden language. At the edge of the courtyard, you stumble across another inscription. This one isn't in Arabic or Persian, but in Greek letters. Though some characters look oddly distorted, the daughter admits she's puzzled too. Some scholars believe it ties the garden to ancient Alexandrian experiments in botany. Others claim it's gibberish invented by later mystics to look impressive. Either way, it suggests that this hidden space has been absorbing ideas from every corner of the old world, layering them like an onion, or maybe like one of those Mediterranean casseroles that somehow taste better the next day. The garden rewards your efforts with subtle gifts. A cluster of roses blooms in time-lapse before your eyes, petals unfurling like dancers stretching at sunrise. A grove of citrus trees bends its branches to shade you, as though acknowledging your presence, and just when you think this is merely symbolic, you notice your aching feet feel lighter, the blisters you earned wandering palace corridors fading as if massaged away by unseen hands. It seems the garden not only accepts your service, but reciprocates in kind. Who knew? Even enchanted plants understand fair exchange. But this harmony has its counterpoint. Twice now you've seen shadows dart among the colonnades, figures too tall and angular to belong to human courtiers. The daughter warns you they are watchers, spirits bound to test intruders who linger too long. Some legends say they're remnants of Babylonian gate demons, repurposed as guardians of sacred spaces. Others argue they're inventions of overzealous storytellers. Whatever their origin, their eyes glow faintly in the dark like coals stirred in ash. The garden accepts you, but the guardians, jury's still out. You and the daughter retreat to the fountain, resting your backs against its cool marble. She tells you this is the moment of choice. Every generation, someone is asked to serve as mediator, to balance human ambition with the garden's fragile rhythms. Her father once hoped to claim the role himself, but the garden rejected him, perhaps sensing his political hunger. Now it calls to her and bafflingly to you. It isn't about wielding power, she explains, but about being still enough to listen, humble enough to serve. You glance at her, wondering if she realizes how rare such humility is in a palace where even the cooks fight over ladle hierarchy. As dawn fully breaks, you notice the sky glowing gold, the minarets of Baghdad catching fire in the rising sun. The sound of traders and donkeys begins to filter over the wall, reminding you the world outside continues its restless churn. But here, within the marble colonnade, time feels slower, like an hourglass turned on its chingu. You close your eyes, listening to the hum of the fountain, the whisper of leaves, the gentle breath of the Vizier's daughter beside you. Against all odds, you feel at home. For now, the river smells different at dawn. You notice it as you follow the Vizier's daughter along a reed-lined path, the damp air mixing earthy mud with the faint sweetness of lotus blossoms. Somewhere in the distance, an early fisherman slaps the surface of the water with his oar, a sound that echoes in the stillness like an impatient knock. The princess doesn't speak. Her chant feels deliberate, heavy, as if words themselves could alert unwanted ears. You keep step, trying not to trip on twisted roots, though your sandal catches once, and she shoots you a look, half amusement, half seriously, before resuming her determined pace. At the edge of the riverbank, a small barge waits, tethered with rope that looks far too frayed for comfort. You hesitate, and she notices. "Don't worry," she whispers. "This vessel has carried heavier burdens than us." You're not entirely reassured, especially when one board creaks like a rusty hinge beneath your foot. But you step in anyway, clutching the rail as the princess unties the rope with a practiced tug. The river seizes the boat immediately, pulling you both into its gliding current. The city fades behind you. Its domes and towers shrink, silhouettes dissolving into morning haze. Ahead, the river stretches like a silver ribbon, unfurling between endless green. Birds scatter from papyrus reeds, startled by your passage, and dragonflies buzz close enough to hear the thin rattle of their wings. You lean back and pretending you're calm. Though the boat rocks with unnerving freedom, the princess doesn't seem bothered at all. She adjusts her veil against the rising sun and points toward the eastern bank. "There," she says softly. "That's where the first clue lies." As she speaks, you remember something oddly specific from a late-night history binge. Ancient Egyptians believed the Nile wasn't just a river, but a divine artery linking the world of the living to the underworld. The Greeks borrowed that same idea, layering their myths of Charon the ferryman over it. Funny how rivers everywhere become metaphors for journeys you can't turn back from. You shift uncomfortably, wondering if that's exactly what you're on right now, a one-way trip. Your stomach growls loudly enough to break the mood. The princess smirks from beneath her cloak. She produces a small bundle wrapped in palm leaves, flatbread, dried figs, and a lump of cheese. It smells tangy, rustic, like a picnic prepared centuries too early for you. You take a bite, instantly grateful. The figs are sweet enough to glue your molars together. "Do you always keep snacks hidden?" you ask. She raises an eyebrow. "Survival requires foresight." Point taken. Halfway across the river, you spot something unexpected. A cluster of half-submerged pillars, carved stone jutting out like broken teeth. The current nudges you closer, and you realize they're the remains of a temple, long abandoned, its lintels covered in reeds and mud. She steers the boat near enough for you to see faint inscriptions on the stone. Your mind sparks with recognition, hieroglyphs depicting lotus flowers and serpents intertwined. Scholars have argued endlessly about the meaning of serpent motifs in Nile temples. Some insist they represent rebirth. Others claim they were warnings, guardians of sacred thresholds. The princess only glances at them and says, "They are watching," which is not comforting. You paddle with a makeshift oar while she balances gracefully at the prow, scanning the bank. Her posture is so sure, so certain that you almost forget she is still a teenager, albeit one carrying more responsibility than most adults you know. Do you ever get scared? You ask. She doesn't answer right away. Finally, she murmurs, "Only when others depend on me." That quiet honesty lands harder than the rocking of the boat. As the sun climbs higher, the water darkens with shifting reflections. You think about crocodiles, because of course your brain goes there, and wonder if ancient travellers used anything like modern bug spray or repellent. Actually, they did. Archaeologists found recipes for oils mixed with cedar resin and even ground up crocodile dung as sunscreen and protection. Yeah, imagine rubbing that all over before a river crossing. You glance at the water and shiver. Maybe don't test that recipe today. The boat drifts toward the eastern bank where the reeds thin out. A small clearing reveals itself, a patch of bare earth with faint circular patterns scratched into the soil, too deliberate to be natural. She kneels, brushing aside silt until the grooves form a design, a wheel with 4 spokes radiating outward. "It's a map," she whispers. "The first piece." She traces one spoke pointing north, toward the desert beyond. You tilt your head. "Could just be an old doodle," you say. She shoots you the kind of look that makes you instantly regret the joke. Clearly, this symbol matters. Historians still argue whether secret societies in the medieval Middle East actually communicated through such glyphs, or whether it's a legend cooked up centuries later to make ordinary maps sound mysterious. But here it is, undeniable, scratched into riverbank clay. You feel the weight of the moment settle in your chest. Whatever garden lies ahead, someone wanted it hit badly enough to invent coasts along the Nile. The wind picks up. The reeds hiss like whispers. You're suddenly aware of how visible you both are on the open bank. 2 figures crouched over the forbidden symbols. She rolls the map into her sleeve, stands tall, and signals for silence. Across the water, movement flickers. Perhaps just a fisherman. Perhaps something else. The barge bumps against the shore. Eager to stay or eager to flee, you can't tell. The princess turns to you, her expression unreadable. The river carries us to secrets, but also to enemies. She says, her voice has sharpened, edged with caution. You swallow hard, gripping the boat rail as if that could steady both of you. The journey has just deepened, and you can't shake the feeling that the Nile itself is testing you. The current presses the hull against the mud, and for the first time you sense how thin the line is between discovery and danger, between floating safely and capsizing. You're not sure which way you're drifting. You follow Scheherazade's words deeper into the winding path of the secret garden, and now the story bends toward peril. The air grows hushed, like a stage just before the curtain rises, and the torches you imagine flickering along the garden's stone walls seem to lean inward, as though eavesdropping. The vizier's daughter, once merely a player in palace intrigue, is now the sole guardian of her own fate. The vines above form a canopy so thick that you catch yourself whispering, as if even your breath could summon something dangerous. And yes, you're still lying in bed listening to a bedtime history video, but somehow the room feels less like a safe cocoon and more like a hush-hush portal. Come on to the final gauntlet. Final. The daughter treads into the last, uncharted quarter of the garden, where rumour insists the jinn themselves carved fountains out of moonstone. She finds evidence of this, basins glowing faintly as if lit from below, water spilling in silver threads. Historians still argue whether jinn in Middle Eastern folklore were originally tied to sacred natural spaces, or simply became scapegoats for unexplained phenomena. Either way, you sense that stepping across this threshold is equivalent to signing a contract with mystery. She soon discovers that the prince, her supposed ally, has been playing a dangerous double game. He isn't just here to aid her rebellion against the vizier's corruption. He wants the garden's power for himself. Cue your modern brain thinking. Of course, classic toxic situationship. And just like every bad situationship, There's the inevitable moment where masks slip and words become weapons sharper than any blade. While the argument unfolds, you hear the daughter's courage sharpen. She invokes her mother's teachings, those hushed prayers spoken while grinding herbs in the palace kitchens. She even channels scraps of oral wisdom passed through female attendants, the kind that never made it into official chronicles, but carried real strategies for survival. A quirky tidbit here. Medieval kitchens in the Middle East sometimes doubled as informal schools for women, where gossips had shared recipes and political strategies blended in one simmering pot. The Vizier's daughter embodies that blend. Her rebellion is flavoured with cardamom and resistance. The confrontation spills into physical space. The prince grasps at one of the glowing fountains, believing he can claim its light like bottled wine. But instead, the water recoils, flashing with violent brilliance. The daughter remembers a phrase carved earlier in a mosaic. Light shared is light multiplied. So instead of hoarding the power, she stretches out her arms, recites the forbidden verse, and invites the garden itself to flow through her. And here's where you picture the scene. Vines curling like serpents around treacherous ankles, blossoms opening into blazing stars, the air thick with perfume that almost intoxicates. It's overwhelming, the kind of moment where your narrator brain nudges you. If this were real, you probably wouldn't survive the pollen count. But it works. The garden sides with her, not the prince. He stumbles back, forced to recognize that greed cannot harvest what was always meant for stewardship. As the dust clears, you realize that her act of courage isn't just resistance, it's transformation. She is no longer a pawn in her father's palace, nor merely the star of a bedtime story. She has become the living guardian of a myth. And because this is history meets fairy tale, the moment echoes outward. Later chroniclers will whisper that hidden gardens across Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus had their own women protectors, keepers of secrets the official historians barely dared mention. And so you drift along with her, through this shimmering conflict that smells of roses and betrayal. The garden is no longer secret, it's awake, pulsing, watching, and you, despite lying safe in bed, can almost feel its branches tugging at your sleeves, reminding you that curiosity is both gift and trap. You let your breathing slow as Scheherazade's voice winds toward its last cadence, the way a river softens before dissolving into the sea. The garden, now awake and pulsing with hidden authority, becomes more than a backdrop. It is a living archive of choices, sacrifices, and whispered wisdom, and the Vizier's daughter, standing tall among vines and fountains, is no longer just a character in a tale told to delay the dawn. She is a symbol, her courage woven into the fabric of the story so tightly that it will hum forever in the minds of listeners like you. The prince fades into the background, retreating into shadows. He is diminished not by death but by irrelevance, and sometimes, a history suggests, irrelevance is the sharpest punishment of all. The daughter, by Scheherazade, steps into the glow of moonlit water, embodying the lesson that endurance and creativity are forms of power too subtle for tyrants to predict. In this moment, you sense Scheherazade's artistry. She doesn't just narrate events, she plants ideas like seeds in the fertile soil of your imagination. And as you recline in your bed, eyes heavy, you realize that the secret garden is both real and metaphorical. Real, in the sense of those lost medieval oases built with irrigation ingenuity and guarded like treasures. Metaphorical, in how every one of us has a hidden plot inside, pockets of wonder and defiance waiting to bloom if only given space. You begin to wonder, what secret garden lies within your own memory, your own heart, waiting for you to stumble into it by chance? Scheherazade knows what she's doing. She lets her story taper into rhythm, like a lullaby disguised as legend. She threads history into myth, science into superstition, fact into dream, so that even when you wake tomorrow, you won't be able to tell where scholarship ended and sorcery began. And that perhaps, is the magic of strange science and forgotten lore. It doesn't end, it lingers, a quiet current under the skin of time. The Vizier's daughter closes her eyes, hands still wet with the silver water of the fountain. She exhales, and the garden exhales with her. The branches relax, the blossoms fold, the stones grow cool, everything settles back into the stillness of night. And that's when you understand this wasn't just about resisting corruption, it was about learning how to share light without trying to own it. As Scheherazade's final words float across the silence, she offers you, not the king, not the vizier, not even the daughter, her blessing. She whispers, oft as the hush between dreams, "May your garden remain hidden until you need it. May you always find light enough to share, and may the stories keep you safe through the night." You drift now, tucked into history's lull, between gin and jasmine, between shadow and flame. The secret garden closes its gates, and your eyelids do the same. Sleep settles over you, the truest ally of dreamers. Good night, traveller. May your dreams be strange, and may your sleep be long.